Alrighty then. Welcome. It's Talking Smack with Bob and Jack. Good to have you aboard for another episode. How many is this, Jack? What number are we up to? Do you know?
Ooh, 23 maybe?
23
24?
episodes. Wow. I didn't
Yeah.
realize we had been going that long. That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
So,
Time flies when you're having fun, man.
yeah. And, I want to welcome everybody. I am, of course, perched inside of my studio with a massive black and white American flag draped behind me. And, my partner is, of course, let's see if we can welcome him to the program properly here.
George of the jungle, strong as he can be. Watch out for that tree. George of the jungle lives.
Jack prefers his jungle paradise.
Man.
Watch out for that tree. When he gets sense.
Did you? You're a little younger than me, but do you remember this?
Oh my
afternoon
gosh,
cartoon?
yes. Yeah, absolutely. Bob,
Remember Shep?
I do. You're not botanically sensitive, man. I mean, I'm over here. Hey, they told me to embrace being green. That's what I'm doing, man. This is me being green, Bob. This is me being green.
So you're part of Gang Green. You want electric cars, you want solar power, you want windmills, you don't want fossil fuels. You're okay with canceling the pipeline. You're okay with canceling the leases for drilling and fracking. You're okay with trying to crush the oil industry, right? That's what is that who you are? You just called yourself Mr. Green.
No, I said this is me being green, right?
Okay, well,
Mayor Pete Buttigieg, he probably is on his bike, riding to Ohio. That's his being green. This is my being green. No, but to answer your question about electric cars, I had a really good conversation with Mike Gibbons, who we had on recently.
Yeah.
And the Ohio Press Network, we're going to be writing a lot about energy in the near future. And
is Mike in an EV?
No, but he's done a lot of research on EVs for fleet vehicles within a certain radius, and in that instance, it might make a little bit of sense, but it's something that the market has to create a demand for, not artificial demand. Joe Biden taking our tax dollars, and, artificially inflating the demand for something. And I just don't know that it's a great idea for people to expect to drive an electric vehicle everywhere. I don't think peak power is at where it would need to be in order for that to happen. I think that's a disaster waiting to happen.
Well, I think it's an awful idea. Mike Gibbons is much smarter than I because he is much more wealthy than I. He is much more successful than I. He has done a lot of things, so I will defer to his wisdom. But I think it's an awful thing to push and promote and try to make a majority or even a significant number of American vehicles into these EVs. The American electrical grid cannot support it.
No.
The cost of the infrastructure to replace all or most of the marathons and BPs and speedways and everything else at every off-ramp of every highway throughout this entire system, north, south, east to west, with charging stations that you would be charged, from what I am hearing, more than, when you break it down about how far you get to go on a charge, than you were paying for gas anyway. You will have to swipe your card and charge your vehicle, except instead of being filled up in 3 minutes, it's going to be, if you have the super high, like 220 line or whatever, the rapid charging thing, you'll be done in 20 minutes instead of 40. And then you're only going to get maybe 150 miles before you got to do it again.
Yep.
You're not getting 400 miles the way I can fill up my truck and get 420 miles before I got to stop and do this all over again for another 3 minutes. Glug, 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 glug. Here we go. Mm-hmm. So the infrastructure can't handle that. And worse off, or more importantly to me, is the fact that they are doing this for purposes that are simply completely at odds with what the facts are. They say the purpose is to save the planet. The purpose is to use these renewables so we don't have to use these very limited, finite resources like fossil
Like
fuels.
lithium.
Thank you.
Sorry.
And cobalt and manganese, all of the things that go into those batteries, which then need to be built in plants. What kinds of plants? What are they powered by?
Not these green plants.
No.
Production plants.
Coal-powered plants will build those batteries. Which, by the way, the ingredients that go into this whole thing, the essential minerals and whatnot that make these up, they're not in abundance in North America. You know where they are in abundance? They're in abundance in Africa and in China, and yes, in the not the Sudan, the other one, the Congo. In the Congo, and guess who controls that land? China does. So we would be at the mercy of Xi Jinping, and we're going to be talking about China in just a moment here a lot. We'd be at the mercy of Xi Jinping. We'd be trying to get all of these precious minerals brought to the United States to build our own batteries. And apparently what we've been told is that mining deep into the earth for things like coal, drilling deep into the earth for things like oil and for natural gas is bad for it. But apparently digging thin veins down to get these particular items that are necessary, and I don't know what to call them, these precious resources, is also done, by the way, by child slave labor in the Congo.
That's right.
That's who they get down. The skinniest little things they can do to get down there and bring these things up. I saw a massive report on it. The humanitarian crisis is through the roof on that. And the worst thing is, like I said, if digging for resources and for fuels and for fossil fuels is bad, well, then what about that digging, number one? And then number two, once you build the battery and now you have to run it with electricity, 85% of American electricity comes from coal and natural gas. You try to run America's electrical grid with a windmill or with 5 million windmills on massive, and you think oil derricks, they say oil derricks are ugly, Jack. Look at wind farms. Now picture them everywhere. That's not to mention the solar panel farms. So the idea that we should somehow be converting to this is not about the planet. It is not about climate change. This is all about pure, unadulterated control of the people by controlling the resources, by control. And by the way, do you know what the government can't do to your, what kind of car you drive, Jack?
Nissan Altima.
You know what they can't do to your Nissan Altima or my F-150? They can't shut it off with a push of a button. They can if it's an EV. And that is exactly what they want. Everybody. They want to limit mobility. They want to limit people's number of miles that they drive. They want to limit where people can live. You're going to have to live a lot closer to your job now. So they're going to take people from the rural areas and the suburbs and force them to get closer to where their jobs are because they're not going to be able to drive. I mean, I'm sorry. And I'll have a conversation with Mike Gibbons. We'll bring him back on and we'll talk about this. But I just think it's an awful, awful, awful plan. And it has nothing to do with climate change or saving the planet. It has everything to do with control.
I think he would agree with you on that, and I agree with you on that. There's only a couple things I disagree with you on. I don't think that that's going to put us at the mercy of Xi Jinping. I think what has put us at his mercy is when then Vice President Joe Biden allowed Hunter Biden to ride along with him on Air Force Two and strike a deal with communist China that was, $1 billion in 2018. It's probably somewhere north of that, closer to $2 billion now. Joe Biden has been compromised with China since he was vice president of the United States. So it's no surprise.
Well, I don't disagree with that, Jack, but this move toward all electric vehicles is going to be much, much later than Joe Biden has left in office. He won't be an issue anymore. But you're right. He is, he has put us in, in that situation with China. 100% agree. But by the time we get to the reality of them trying to force this and make this happen, I think Joe Biden will be a distant memory.
Yeah, and I think what will also, I think the other thing that will be a memory is I think that our power structure, our power grids, our power delivery system is not equipped to handle what stupid people like Joe Biden are trying to tell us needs to happen. And I think there's going to be a resurgence for the demand of internal combustion engines, not too many years down the road.
I completely agree. And by the way, jet fuel is never going to be replaced by some sort of a big battery on the back of a 767. It's not going to happen. And by the way, just to say it, we don't need to. Everybody with a brain knows it. Petrochemicals are used for a lot more than just fuel for engines.
Yes,
petrochemicals literally are in everything that's around me right now and everything that's around you right now, from the carpet to the plastic on your computer to, just about literally everything. So the petroleum industry, the oil industry is never, ever going to not be needed. And the idea that he declared when he came into office that he would, quote, destroy the fossil fuel industry. He said, and mark my words, hear me, you can believe me or not, but we will destroy and stop the fossil fuel industry. That was his dedication to his voters and to his followers. So that means he wants to just stop the United States of American economy. So,
or
there
or
you go.
or bomb pipelines,
Yeah,
in
or
other
blow up
parts of
Nord
the
Stream
world.
pipelines and then say, oh, the Russians must have done it. Because, of course, the Russians really benefit from having the Nord Stream pipeline bombed and have it unusable, because that really, really helps. It wasn't like they were the one collecting the money from everything that flowed through it, for crying out loud, to Germany and everywhere else. Yeah, it made sense that Putin would want to bomb his own pipeline. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, Jack, I'm glad we're just kind of riffing here a little bit on foreign matters like Russia and China, because one of the big questions of the day is, as we continue to funnel money to Ukraine for its war against invading Russia, concern now is, when does Xi Jinping and the CCP start funding Russia to support their incursion? Because that is what a lot of people believe is going to be the next thing. And we'll be fighting a proxy war against China by way of Ukraine versus Russia. And that's my setup for our guest. Why don't you tell us who we have?
Yeah, I met Xi Van Fleet in October of 2022 at an event that was hosted by BW Strategy Pack, which is the group that was created by our friend Lad Dilgard. And that group was responsible for bringing attention to local school board races and candidates. That resulted in driving out board members who were allowing woke ideology to seep into an otherwise conservative school. That night that I met Xi, I was the warm up for her keynote, and she delivered a stirring and stunning talk that it changed me. I looked at Whitney, she looked at me, and went, "Wow, we really need to get a grip on what's going on and start being proactive about how we deal with it." And I'm going to let her tell that story, but it was about her life in Mao's China and her exodus to the United States. And so without further ado, I want to welcome Xi Van Fleet to Talkin' Smack with Bob and Jack.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me to your show. And it was great meeting you that night. It's like what, 3 months ago?
It was October of 2022. Yeah,
Yes,
time's
yeah.
flying. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Now, G, before we dive into your story, that really should be a caution to all Americans. I want to let you pitch your book, and I know it's early, but I want to get it on everyone's radar. What is the name and nature of your book, and when is it
Okay.
published?
I just turned the manuscript to the publisher, so the title is not final, but part of it, I think, is pretty much final, and it's Mao's America, and it's all about parallels that I witnessed and lived through in Mao's China, and what's happening here. And it's all about parallels. And so that is a very, very terrifying for me to see. It is absolutely a repeat of what I experienced in China. That's going on now, the wokeism.
Well, Xi, first of all, I want to join Jack in welcoming you to our podcast. Thank you so very much. And thank you for being such a vocal presence on this issue. I was reading a little bit about your remarks to the school board in Loudoun County, Virginia. I know you had a son who was in school there back in 2021 is when you were speaking, and you were trying to sound the alarm about the parallels that you saw, in Mao's China, which I love, by the way, your book title, Mao's America, because you really
It is
are
the same thing. Yeah.
drawing that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've interviewed on my radio program, Xi, people like you, meaning they came from and spent some time in as younger people, and sometimes even as into their adult years, in socialist and communist nations such as Venezuela and Cuba. And they have come on and done much of what I think you're doing it in much more depth because you're writing a book about it, or you've written a book about it. But they saw the same thing. They saw the signs and the parallels of what led from Venezuela being the most wealthy nation in that region of the world, and the people there really thriving, to the socialist hellhole, to the point where they were cooking sewer rats on steaks over dumpster fires. With the Cuban Revolution, when Castro came in, and they all see similarities to what the government was doing there and what it became to what our government is doing here.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit slower, but it is every bit as steady as marching toward that. So I have a little experience with people who have described it in those nations. Now tell us about what you saw in China that you see happening right here.
Okay, the parallels are just absolutely alarming. It is it is really communism taking over of this country. There's nothing, less and less than that. And I tell people the infiltration of communism in America is complete. We see it at every level, and we see it in the generation, the young generation that's been processed by the Marxist professors in university. So there's so much. I don't think I can cover everything, but I can just focus on a few. Okay, so one of the things is communism, and to a lot of young people, of course, they were taught by their professors, it's all about sharing, right? The name itself sounds good, communism. We all share, and we have common basically we
Common interests, sharing things with one another,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Yeah. But they don't understand how do you implement that. It's not like we are willingly to share with each other, which we do, but it is not that kind of a sharing. It is the state tell you, or state not even tell you. State take what you have and give it to others, and so it is absolutely the state controlling everything, and yes, first thing is controlling the means of production. Yeah, so the wealth, and then whatever wealth they could get their whole hands on, and then we redistribute it, and that's the first step. And but eventually, because communism is incapable of creating wealth, so eventually, just like Venezuela, which we can witness right now, it's history taking place in front of our eyes, and then the wealth is gone, and then what they can share and what they can redistribute it. Misery and poverty that happened in every communist country, no exception. Okay, so that's one thing.
Okay, go ahead, Jack.
No, I was just going to make a comment. I know you have a question. That really kind of makes sense when you look at the villainization of productivity and affluence and wealth. I mean, you can't turn on a news outlet, the fake news, without hearing how evil communism is, how evil wealth and affluence and productivity is. But I mean, that's right in line with where we are. When you said that, I just went, that totally makes sense.
I just want to say that is the old school communism. That is Bernie Sanders. That is Warren Buffett. Elizabeth Warren. Those are the kind of old school communism. They want to share wealth. But Marxism is more than that. Communism is much more than that. It is state control, controlling everybody's mind. You have to think certain way. You have to talk certain way. If you don't, you're enemy of the state. So I can talk a little bit about how they divide people, because
let's hold on. Let's hold off on that for a moment, Xi, and we appreciate you being with us again. We apparently we've got a little bit of a video problem to get Xi Van Fleet on the screen with us, but obviously you can hear her rather clearly. So we'll continue this way. Xi, I just wanted to follow up about what you were saying. This isn't about people voluntarily giving up their property. It is about people voluntarily giving up everything they have to the collective and then having it distributed. It is taken by force from totalitarian regimes, communist regimes, in all of world history. It is taken by force, and if you try to resist and try to push back, you will be killed, or you will be thrown into gulags, or you will be thrown into some sort of prisons, and you will be left to rot. And you can't even push back or organize any kind of resistance because you don't know where the state's spies are. You don't know if you're talking to somebody who's like-minded or maybe who's going to pretend to be, and they're worried about their children's ability to be fed as well. You start complaining about it, they report you, and it's over. So, but where I'm going with this is, Here in the United States, there is an organization called RevCom USA, the Revolutionary Communist Party USA. They meet, they have conventions, they have organization, they have plans about trying to bring an end to capitalism, free market, ability to rise, and to earn wealth, and ability to continue to advance and so forth. They want to bring communism here. So my question for you is, in every other nation where it is forced upon the people, how on earth would Americans who were born free, born privileged, choose to implement something that they have seen around the world that brings nothing but, as you said, misery and poverty and destruction?
This is a very complicated question. Why? That's my question. Why? Americans, are you crazy? Do you know the history? They don't.
No, they don't.
That is absolutely the problem. After this, the Cold War, we claim that we beat communism. But what is communism? Most Americans do not know. That is why. That is why I'm so passionate about teaching, educating Americans with my whatever called so-called lived experience. That is the other things that in school, starting from public school and especially in universities, they teach you the evil of capitalism. Yeah, they say that you see the poverty, right? You see the homeless. That is because of capitalism. And I had a Twitter exchange with a communist professor today, even today. And so he said he's turning 50 in the birthday. He had a good life, has good insurance, good salary. The only problem is not everybody has what he has. That's why he believes in communism. And I told him, I told him what you have when the communism succeeded will be distributed to the poor, and you will be struggled against, because you are actually will be regarded as an enabler of communism. That's how you're going to end up. You're going to end up in the reform labor camp. And he said,
Right.
but you see, capitalism does not give everyone good life. I said, that's true. But communism gives no one good life. Only the
Well, capitalism gives people the opportunity for a good life if they choose to work. And do you find in the United States, comparative to China, you have a lot of people here, the ones that might be a little bit more interested in a socialist like Bernie Sanders or Liz Warren, becoming president and a leader and so on and forth, are the ones who don't want to work for the opportunity, who don't care about the quote unquote American dream, which involves working hard, advancing yourself, getting promoted, buying property, getting promoted again, maybe even starting a business and so forth. These are the people that are just flat out lazy and are like, whatever the government gives me, I'll take it. I just hope they give everybody the same thing. I don't have to work then. That lazy attitude is one that's pervasive and one that is easily exploited by those wishing to start a communist regime.
And that, to me, that is part of what the cultural Marxism does. And that is discredit the American value, the traditional value, and that we all have the same opportunity, but you have to work on it. That's why they have the younger generation that see an inequality everywhere. They are not there to do their share to make their life better. No, they're there to be revolutionary, to turn basically to tear down this country, because that's what they are taught. That there are two things going on. Yeah, but this is what I say. Cultural Marxism.
So I've heard, I mentioned Mike Gibbons at the beginning of the show, and he's told this story several times. And Bob, maybe you've heard it. He used to teach economics, and he would ask every one of his students, are you a capitalist? Are you a socialist? And the folks who identified as being socialist, he would say, okay, here's the deal. For the capitalists, whatever grade they earn, they're going to get. And if you're a socialist, you're going to get a C. Doesn't matter how hard you work. Doesn't matter what your grade is on the test. And Bob, to your point, Mike Gibbons said the students in the class that wanted to go to the bar, didn't want to study, wanted to, chase a boyfriend or a girlfriend were like, yes, absolutely, I'm in, man, give me the C. But the students who wanted to work, who wanted to learn, maybe wanted to go on to grad school, were like, no, 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 no. So it's really interesting. I think when push comes to shove, people who claim to be Marxists, communists, socialists, I think the first group of people who will go over onto that other side of the scale are the lazies, are the ones who don't feel like they're empowered to do anything effective or productive in their lives. But G, what do you think? How do you think that when push comes to shove, for example, that college professor, I mean, the first question I would have asked him was, how much do you make? Okay, I make less. Why don't you go ahead and stroke a check for the difference between your salary and mine? And
that's
you know what he would have said? No.
That's exactly what happened. That's what I'm trying to tell him. That's exactly what happened in China, that wealth is the original sin. So if you have wealth, or if you have professional skills that you are ahead of everybody, and that's not good. So the communism will pull you down. Okay, if you have land, your land will be distributed. If you are a professor, you need to go to the re-education camp to reform yourself, so you are more like a peasant or worker. And that they have been doing that during the Mao's era, and I experienced that, and I witnessed that. You don't want to be you don't want to be better than anyone else. You want to be just like everyone else or less. That's where the safe zone is. If you stick your head out and be good at anything, you're in trouble. And that's why communism and socialism can only do one thing to achieve equity, to bring everybody down, everybody to the very bottom. And they are very good at that.
No, I apologize. I thought you were wrapping up your thought. Continue, please.
Yeah, no.
I just wanted to follow up on that and then ask a new question. And to what Jack was just saying, too, about that story from Mike Gibbons. The worst part, the worst effect or consequence of that socialist model, like in a classroom, is after a while, the students that aspire to work hard and get good grades know that it's futile and it's pointless, and then they start to become lazy themselves. They start to become unmotivated. They start to realize there's no point. I can't get ahead because everybody is going to have the same grade. Everybody's going to have the same thing. So they stop. And it's the same thing in an economy or with somebody who's an entrepreneur, somebody who might really want to start their own business, and they realize they're going to take it from me. The government's going to take half of my earnings or more. They're going to not let me have my property. They're going to make me pay tax on the property. Everything that they can do to take away. And then it just crushes the spirit of the capitalist or the entrepreneur, and I think that's the worst ramification, and I think that's part of what Xi was saying here. And Xi, what I want to ask you now, again, because you are writing about and you're talking about the parallels between what happened when communist China became Mao's China. That's why your book is called Mao's America, and we'll keep promoting that. Most of us who are in this age range, I guess, only know China as Red China. We only know China as Communist China. What was China like? And you probably have to go back into history for this. You didn't experience it. You were 6, I think, when you got out of China, Mao's China. But what was China like before Mao?
Well, that is China has 3,000 years of history, and it had its heydays, and by the time that the Western power showed up at the shore of China, and Chinese realized they were really just at a very awkward state. They did not have the technology, and they did not have this kind of a government, and to really face the power and the threat from the West. And so, of course, the Opium War, all this, and China was really beat badly by the Western power. Even though China was never colonized, we call ourselves semi-colonized. All the coastal areas of provinces were divided up by the Western power like France, Germany, Britain, whatever. So China had that experience of colonization. And then China was divided, and there was a civil war going on. So China was very much in a very bad state. That's why when this idea of communism came from Russia, a lot of young people are attracted to that idea, including Mao. So so later, that was the struggle between the nationalists, who also was inspired by the Western idea of equity, of freedom, and it's the fight between these two forces, communists and the nationalists. And eventually, the Americas, in this, just like today, they did make mistakes. They did not support the nationalists. So Russia, Soviet got the opportunity to back both eventually, and help communists to win. And then the nationalist was kicked out to Taiwan. So that is the history. But what I'm trying to say is when a country was experiencing so much problem, foreign invasion, like a Japanese invasion, and a civil war, civil unrest, and also the problem, communists somehow really start to be very appealing to the people. And so Mao's rallying cry is, follow us, we will get the land from the landlord, and we will divide them up among the poor. That's why he got the support of the peasantry, which made up like 85% of the Chinese population. And then the young people also was attracted to the idea of communism because it promised freedom, promised equity, promised all the things that it turned out to be not true. But yeah.
It's really interesting because to hear you talk about how it appealed to younger people. Bob and I both have kids, and I know that you mentioned you do too, Xi. The things that we teach our kids, right? Well, first of all, I think we're all hardwired to want to be in relationship and to want to be in community. So you talk about communism and community and collectivism. It kind of sounds good. And, most of us taught our kids from a very young age, you share, right? You're kind, you share. And so I feel like that's how they start playing on the naivete, and they start half-truthing, how this is all going to work out, and it's going to be some sort of nirvana. But you mentioned how Mao was dividing. How do you see that going on with our kids right now in schools? Can you pinpoint that?
Yeah. That is one of the most obvious parallel is divide people. So communism has to divide people because communism is all about conflict, divide people so that they fight with each other. And so in China, they use class. Yeah, just like in Russia, just like in Venezuela, just like in Cuba, they use class. So it's the poor against the rich. And okay, you want to say something, Bob?
I do, because I wanted you to tell us it's not class in America, is it? What are they
No,
using to
it's
divide
not.
us in America?
That's right.
It's
That's
not.
right.
That's what I'm trying to get to. Okay, it's the class in China that worked in all this communist country, in Vietnam, all worked until now, because America class, divide people by class, would not work. Even though Bernie Sanders and Warren still hold on to that idea of class. You just go to their Twitter. Every day it's about the rich, the poor, 1% and 99%. But in America, it won't work well. That's why, before I go on, that's why they want to import proletariat. They want to import poor people. That's why they want to open the border so that we got more poor. They depend on the poor. When you have more poor against the rich, we have the conflict, we have the war, class war. But that won't work that well in America. So they have to find something else to divide people. And obviously, I always say, if anyone, you can ask anyone, if you want to divide America, what is the best way? I mean, most people will say, of course, race. Yeah, exactly. So they go by race because we had the troubled history, the race relation. We have slavery, yes, and Jim Crow. And they want to keep that alive. They absolutely would not let it go because that is one of the most potent way for them, the weapon to divide people. And that is absolutely a tailor-made, I say tailor-made for America. But that's still not enough. Don't you think?
Yep.
That's still not enough.
So what are the other ways? Because I'm starting to see this now, right? They're dividing, and more people are going on that other side of the scale to be in favor of this revolution. All right.
It's a formula. So Mao succeeded in dividing people. It's the 99%. Exactly. He calculated the number, come up just like what Bernie Sanders said. It's 99 versus 1%. And they mobilized 99, and then they defeated the 1% and divided all their wealth among people. Okay, but here, you get class, you get race, you still don't have enough people to divide America. That's what identity politics is called for. Actually, racism, identity by race is one, but it's not enough. So other identity. So we can make that long laundry list by age, right? By sex. Sex, what I mean is women and women against men, right? And that's not sexuality, and then that's not gender in terms of how many genders are there. And by now today, by body type, fat versus fit, right? Abled versus disabled. They absolutely can go on and on and on. And then the gold mine they found is trans, because trans is not just transgender. You can trans reality and create an identity for yourself. And then what you do with identity, you claim a piece of victim privilege. It's all about power. And so
you are so spot on, G. I want to jump in for a second because you are explaining everything so clearly that anybody could understand this. And I hope they are, because intersectionality is what we're talking about when we talk about identity politics. You take all of these different victim groups and then they cross over one another, and everybody does exactly what you said. They can claim victim status, and victim status becomes victim privilege. How dare you put down these people or limit these people in any way? And it does create division, not just a split down the middle, black and white, or in the other cases.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. It's in a million different directions now, but the point is, no one is allowed to be judged and no one is allowed to be offended. And what you just said about trans is the perfect scenario, because it's not just man to woman, woman to man, boy to girl, girl to boy. It's boy to dog. It's girl to cat. It's adult to child. We have people living as child, and no one is allowed to judge them because their identification in their head, they feel like a 5-year-old or a 2-year-old. They're wearing diapers. All of these insane. We have people going trans-abled. I'm sure you've seen this, surgically having a limb removed because they feel in their head that they are only one-armed. And they want to be, and so they get disabled privilege. This kind of thing, if we try to bring sanity back, G, we are the ones then who are trying to deny people their freedom. And
exactly.
That's how they split us.
I have to say, Mao's cultural Marxism is really like very primitive. He did not need elaborated way to divide Chinese people, But the American Marxists, they're really genius. They really, really figure out and how to divide people. I call them Marxists with Marxists with American characteristics. They are just incredible. They absolutely have been able to divide us, and so many people, especially young people, bought into it.
So I can think
of
of two more right off the top of my head. You have maskers and anti-maskers. You have vaxxers and anti-vaxxers. You
absolutely.
have insane and the rest of the country. Let me ask the obvious question, because I often need to have things explained to me like a kindergartner. Where does this go though? So I get it, right?
Yeah.
You're dividing with the intent of conquering, but how does that all work? I mean, what is that? What is that result?
Yes. Okay. So what they really try to do, that is the most important thing to understand. What they are trying to do is to get power. That is the real reason they're doing all this. How they're going to get power? Because we are a republic, right? We have system in place. If you want power, you know what? You just have to convince voters to vote for you. But they don't want that. That's too much trouble. So they want power. So how do you achieve power? And you have to destroy this country. That's that. Okay. How do you destroy the country? You have to create conflict. You have to create a conflict, and then you mobilize the people, and then you have chaos. And that's when Mao. This is really interesting. Mao said that we need chaos. We need chaos in order to bring about a new order, and we need chaos every 7 to 8 years. That's what I said. And now it's in America. We have chaos. We have chaos, not every 7 to 8 years. It's every 4 years, right? And
Yep.
and
every two really anymore.
yeah, every two.
two.
Now
Yep.
midterm, it's every two. Exactly. So all this, the conflict, is to create this kind of chaos, this kind of a revolution, and the goal is to overthrow this system so they get to have the absolute power, so that they don't have to worry about using ideas to convince voters. No, they are going to have it, and they're going to absolutely control the way that the election was run, and then they will just be there forever. That is what Mao. That is the reason Mao started Cultural Revolution, because he wanted permanent power. He wanted absolute and permanent power. Once you understand that, all the others is easier to understand.
Xi, first of all, I want to commend you again for the clarity of your explanations to everybody. I think anybody, including a kindergartner, as Jack just said, could understand this. But what I want to know is, do you think they're listening? You're giving speeches, you are writing books, you're speaking before school boards, you're coming on podcasts like this one, and you're telling truth. Are people listening? Are you finding that when you're done talking to people, are they just shaking their heads at the misery of it all, or are they motivated to go and act on these things? What are you finding?
Okay, this is something. Okay, I have to say that we are experiencing this great awakening, because a lot of people did not know that this has been going on since the 1960s. And I told people, we are not having the first time the Cultural Revolution in America. We had it in the 60s. That's the counterculture revolution. That revolution laid the groundwork for today's wokeism, but it did not finish up, because it kind of lost the steam after the end of the Vietnam War. So this is the second phase of the Cultural Revolution. That took them that long. Took them decades to bring America to where we're today. And the conservatives just woke up. Oh, what happened? What happened? It has happening for decades. So I think that this is very important to understand. It's not overnight. And so the institution has been all captured. You probably heard this saying, long march through the institutions, right? They used
That's
the
right.
long approach. They captured all our institutions, every one of them, including the White House. Okay, so what do we do? The first
That was
thing
going to
is
be my next question. How do we get, is there a way out, and how in the world do we get out?
I think the first thing is to make people understand this is communism. So that's my mission, is to educate people what communism was like when I was living in China. It is the same thing. You have to understand this is communism. It is not anti-racism. It is not about inclusion and kindness. It is communism.
And
So,
remind everyone why that's bad, because I think there are a lot of young people in this country who go, so what? Yeah, it's communism, it's socialism, it's a heck of a lot better than capitalism. Gee, you understand it. Why is
okay. So that was what happened in China too. They told people communism is good. It is all about everyone get a share of the wealth. And so, yeah, exactly. Communism today is be kind, so that you will not misgender anybody, even though you know for fact that person, just is not the other gender that they are claiming. But you have to say yes. You have to conform. You have to obey. And that is communism. And they have control of power. Everyone has to obey. They will be the one to tell you what is the truth. You have to obey. If you question, off you go to the concentration camp, to the labor camp. That is why. That is exactly why what they're doing today is take the free speech away, so that everyone have to conform, and that is what's going to happen later. So you dare not to speak differently, you dare not to think differently, and that's communism.
So, Xi, we're getting toward the end of our time, but I do want to take a moment to ask about the future, particularly of our relationship with China, what the intention you think of Xi and the CCP is. There's talk, we had one general in the Pentagon make a comment a couple of weeks ago that he thinks we will be at war with China in 2 years at around 2025. Pentagon quickly said that's not Department information or policy. This is one man's opinion, blah, blah, blah. But the other news this week is that China may be meeting, and in fact, I think Xi Jinping is scheduling a meeting with Vladimir Putin, much like Joe Biden scheduled a meeting with President Zelensky. And if China starts arming the Russians and helps support their incursion into Ukraine and possibly into NATO nations, we're going to have no choice but to push back. And we find ourselves perhaps on the brink of a war with the Chinese. Now, I talked to a man by the name of Gordon Chang a couple of weeks ago.
I know
don't know
him.
if you're
Yes.
familiar. And he told me not only are the Chinese building up their military in terms of personnel at a faster rate than at any time since World War II, they are arming and they are training their citizens to prepare them for war. That it wouldn't just be the Chinese military, which is already formidable, but the entire Chinese population would be pretty much prepared to fight on behalf of China. So, how do you see the coming weeks, months, particularly as it pertains to what's going on in Ukraine right now, and obviously in the next few years?
Yeah, I'm not expert in the geopolitics, international politics or whatever. And Gordon Chang knows more, but this is what I said. China is a threat. China, communists, by definition, is globalists. They always want to bring about communism to the rest of the world. So they are globalists. They are a threat to America and to the whole world. Yes, but I differ from a lot of the China expert. I say the threat of CCP is nothing compared to the threat of the traitors among us. Those are the Marxists. Those are the communists. There's really the communist that is running our institutions. We can disable, we can decouple with China very easily, and the Chinese government cannot run without our capital, without our technology. They cannot. So I think the problem is within. The enemy is within. The most dangerous threat is coming from the progressives and then the elite. That's what I look at it.
Yeah. I mean, we heard language out of the White House not long after the Biden administration took over, overtly saying that, there may just have to be some re-education going on of these dangerous right-wing people and these MAGA Americans. There are a lot of sympathizers, and and maybe that's too weak of a word. G,
No.
Can you pinpoint some people that and maybe it's dangerous to put you in that spot that are not only sympathetic to China but maybe even on that same team?
Oh, too many.
Okay.
Look at all our generals. Look at them, and look at the White House. Look at the Congress. Look at Mitch. What's his name? The Senate minority
Mitch
leader.
McConnell.
Mitch McConnell.
No, yeah, he got where he is with Chinese money, absolutely with Chinese money. So we have traders everywhere, and that to me is I have to say something. I think China is absolutely a threat, but China's military is not as almighty as we were led to believe. The corruption in Chinese military is just like the corruption in other parts of the world. You get promoted not because of your ability, you get promoted because of your connection. And so there are during the past decade when Xi Jinping was trying to launch this campaign against the corrupted officials, that including the military, that including the generals knew nothing about fighting the war, but were able to get where they are through corruption. So no, I don't think the Chinese military is not that powerful.
Well, Xi, I wanna then let's stay away from the military for a moment. Let's talk about, just briefly because we're almost done. Let's talk about the infiltration. You talked about traitors. You talked about, and then you named a few as Jack asked you to do. I want you to talk about what might be the most dangerous traitors to this in this issue in the country, and they're not government related. They're not the president. They're not Mitch McConnell. It's the universities that are allowing things like the Confucius Institutes to operate right there on their campuses. They are heralded as being just a wonderful celebration of Chinese culture and history. It's a Confucius Institute. It's great, but that's not what they are they?
No, and also the corporations. Yes, those universities, they will just do anything in order to get the money from. Like Biden's, the think tank was funded by CCP's money. Is that crazy or what? And Apple was, Apple, Google, Facebook, all of them, they do not think themselves as Americans. They think themselves as globalists. And they all bend backward to please the Chinese, not Chinese, the CCP. So that's what I said, the infiltration is in every level, in education, in corporation, in business, finance. The Wall Street was all bought by the CCP. That is where we are today. That is so sad. That is just absolutely sad that there's so many Americans would sell our country for money, for CCP's money, and then the CCP's money is not even their money. It's the business and then the jobs that were shipped over there, and so that is just it's heartbroken. It's heartbroken for people like us that escaped communist China and love this country and see that so many Americans would do things like that to sell their country for bucks. It's just,
Well,
yeah.
G. Van Fleet, this has been a very illuminating and disturbing conversation because what you're talking about is dangerous, and it's quite frankly, it's potentially deadly if we do not snap to attention and understand what's happening. You saw it happen in China. You saw what happened when Mao's revolution happened. You see it coming here. I told you I've talked to people in other socialist and communist nations who saw the same thing before they escaped, and they see the same signs here. I just hope that voices like yours are heard, magnified. I'll play everything you just said on the radio, and in fact, I'd like to have you on the radio to reach even more people. But it's so important what you're doing. Where's the book available, or is it published yet? I don't know where we are.
No, it's not yet. It's we're aiming at October.
Okay, so we're still in okay.
Yeah.
So the book Mao's America by Xi Van Fleet is going to be coming in October. I hope when it's available for pre-order, you'll let us know, because I think every American needs to be alerted to this. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you for coming on. I'm glad you and Jack met at the event that you did and that you were willing to do this. Keep sounding that alarm. The more you sound it, the more hopefully people will hear it. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for helping me to spread the message.
Thank you. God bless.
Thank you, Xi.
Thank you.
All right, that's Xi Van Fleet. She's a fountain of knowledge and information. She understands it, and she can explain it and articulate it better than anybody, or as well as anybody I think I've heard. Jack, I want to just focus for the last 3-4 minutes that we have here on what I said to her at the end. I see the Confucius Institutes as being a bigger threat than even some of the sellouts, I guess, in our federal government, because the Confucius Institutes on American campuses, particularly some of the largest and most respected, like Stanford, have the ability to influence the next generation of leaders. And that's what they're doing. And that's why they're there. And 2 years ago, in almost to the date, it's March 5th, the Senate, in March 5th, 2021, the Senate passed by unanimous consent a bill that would increase oversight on the Confucius Institutes, because the evidence is clear. They are not only connecting and colluding and collaborating with, but they are run by the CCP, not some Chinese cultural center, the Chinese Communist Party. According to Human Rights Watch, the Confucius Institutes are, quote, Chinese government-funded outposts that offer Chinese language and culture classes. However, they are also well known for spreading propaganda, which again is aimed at our young people on the campuses. Yes. Senator John Kennedy, who introduced the bill, said Confucius Institutes are under the control of the Chinese Communist Party, and this bill will give colleges and universities full control over their resident Confucius Institutes and restore freedom of thought on their campuses. There's more. There's a lot more comments I could read here, but the fact that this at least is on the radar of some of our federal leaders, particularly in the Senate in this case, doesn't mean that the Democrats are going to go along with it, because they'll see it all as anti-Asian hate if you try to crack down on the Confucius Institutes. But they're aware enough that they're passing resolutions like that, and it will take the masses, not just a few people, not just a handful of people, not just a city full of people. It's going to take a massive response of Americans in every city and in every district to tell their representatives and their senators, get the Chinese Confucius Institutes out of our universities. Jack, I don't want to be hyperbolic here, but literally, America's future may depend on it. What she just described about communism overtaking the United States is real, and this is aimed at creating millions. How many college students are there in America? Millions of good young believers in communist principles as preached by the CCP through the Confucius Institutes. I'm not trying to be exaggerative, and I'm not trying to be melodramatic, and I'm not trying to be hyperbolic, but Jack, our future, I swear on God that it's true, is in the balance here. I think China is that much of a threat.
I absolutely believe that China is that much of a threat, and I believe having Joe Biden in the White House makes it exponentially more dangerous because of his compromised
Yeah.
position with the CCP. And I want to point out, Xi made the statement. I don't know if you caught it, but this is language is so important. She said the Chinese, and she said no, the CCP. There's a difference between Chinese people who are suffering under the authoritarianism and the communist versus the communist government. Those are two
Yep.
separate things.
Totally.
And so as they try to identity politic their way out of this, we have to be very clear about it is the communist Chinese government that is the problem, that is the issue. And it's going to take these types of conversations over and over and over and over again. And I remember hearing Xi speak back in October of last year, and that's what really struck me. I remember her vividly from stage saying that it's complete. The infiltration is complete. And look, unless your head's buried in the sand, you know that to be true. I mean, my goodness, you can't even pick up a newspaper without understanding that we have so much wacky, wonky, crazy stuff going on in our elementary schools, in our corporate boardrooms, in our state legislative bodies, in the White House. I mean, and by the way, yes, we know that Google and Facebook and Apple and Microsoft, of course we know that globalists, look at what the hell they did in 2020, again in 2022, and what they're going to try to do in 2024. They want to silence any opposition. They talk about being collective and they talk about being in community. That only includes their way. Everybody else, you're out. And that's it. They're going to cancel you. And there are crazy people. The Rolling Stone journalist, I think it came out today, was saying cancel culture is good. I mean, that's how embedded into the psyche, the American psyche, this thing is. And so we're going to have to continue to expose this and reveal it and call it is. And look, you have to be diligent, because if not here, where? When America's done, we're done. That's it.
Well, it's important to know, too, and I'm glad you said it, that there's a difference between the CCP and the Chinese.
Yes.
German people who were subject and under the thumb of the Nazis in the 1930s were not responsible for the Nazis. They were powerless.
Right.
Russian people were subjugated by Stalin, were subjugated by Lenin before, were subjugated by the communist totalitarian regime. They weren't supportive of it. They had to pretend to be, or else they'll get killed. Same thing with North Koreans are not bad people because they absolutely have to submit to the whims of a madman like communist Kim Jong-un. And the same thing is true of Xi Jinping's CCP. The Chinese people are not to blame, and the Chinese people are not to be feared. Unless, of course, they are going to be fighting for the Chinese in a coming war, because that is what they're being trained to do. But our mission has to be to recognize who's in charge of the threats and to respond to those things accordingly, and recognize where the threats are coming from. And as she pointed out, it's right in our schools, it's right in our social media, and it's right in our regular media too, as they divide by race, divide by gender, divide by whatever identity politics that they can. Because the more we split and turn on one another, the easier we are to take down. And that's what their mission is.
Hey, Bob, I want to give a quick shout out to the Freedom Foundation. Make sure you go to thefreedomfoundation.com. They are the creators of Opt Out Today. That is the #1 tool for government employees to free themselves from union bondage. If you go there, you check them out, you love them, you want to make a 501c3 tax-deductible donation, do it. And when you type Talkin' Smack in the notes, they'll actually double your contribution. So thank you to the Freedom Foundation for your generous support that makes this podcast possible.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Freedom Foundation, and thank you to everybody who listens. And by the way, if you're interested in supporting the mission that we're on, which is to sound the alarm on things like this, to tell the truth about what's going on in Ohio, what's going on around the globe, and what we can do to try to combat these things, that's what we do. Yeah, we have a little fun. That's what Talkin' Smack is all about. But what we're doing is serious business and serious work. And if you want to support us, we would love to talk to you about sponsorship as well. And for those who can't do that, but you just want to help the cause, share us. Share the link for every podcast that we do on Talkin' Smack with everybody that you can, so they can get it on their platforms as well. We grow this audience, we grow the movement, we grow the knowledge, we grow the education, and we grow the ability to push back against those who are trying to subjugate us. That's going to do it for Talkin' Smack, but before we go, one last little bit of smack talk is in order here. George, Jack of the Jungle. That's our guy, Jack. swinging from the vine twice a week on Talkin' Smack. Thanks, everybody. I'm Bob France. Or no, I'm sorry. Let's do that again. I'm
Start
Bob.
over. And I'm Jack.
And we're Talking Smack. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.